picture this scenario. It's Monday morning. You walk into the office,
Yeah.
or maybe you just, hop onto your first video call of the week.
Oh, yeah, the classic Monday morning setup.
Right. You've got your coffee, you're trying to wake up, and suddenly a colleague smiles at you and asks that dreaded question. So, how was your weekend?
It is arguably the most common question in the entire professional world, honestly.
Yeah.
Yet it triggers this very real, very biological freeze response for, well, anyone learning a second language.
Oh, for sure. I've seen it happen, and I mean, I've experienced it myself. You actually had a fantastic weekend. You saw friends, you ate amazing food, maybe there was even a little bit of drama.
You've got this whole colorful life to share.
Exactly. But in that high-pressure, 5-second window, your brain just completely shuts down, your vocabulary vanishes, and all you can muster is a tight-lipped smile and this totally robotic, "It was good, you're..."
Yeah, and what's happening there isn't actually a lack of vocabulary, it's really a cognitive traffic jam.
A cognitive traffic jam.
Yeah, your brain is trying to retrieve this complex, nuanced narrative, right? And then translate it perfectly, apply a dozen grammar rules, and output it in real time.
Which is just way too much processing load.
Exactly. It's too much, so the system basically just crashes.
Well, today we're going to fix that traffic jam. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is highly specific. We're giving you a shortcut to mastering beginner-level English small talk.
Specifically, we're talking about A1 and A2 level English.
Right. And to clarify for anyone maybe unfamiliar with those terms, A1 and A2 mean you have the basic building blocks of the language.
Yeah, everyday words, you can handle simple interactions, but you aren't writing complex academic essays quite yet.
I like to say you have the bricks, but maybe not the architectural blueprints for a massive mansion.
That's a great way to put it.
And what we are going to prove today is that you really do not need the mansion. You don't need a massive advanced vocabulary to be a captivating storyteller.
No, not at all. But to fix that Monday morning freeze response, we first have to understand what is actually breaking down in our brains.
And that starts with understanding the grammatical engine that powers literally every weekend story.
Yeah, let's look at the opening of the conversation first, because this is where a lot of the anxiety lives. When a native speaker asks, "How was your weekend?" or, "Did you do anything fun?" they are just engaging in a social ritual.
Right. They are definitely not expecting a 20-minute detailed chronological monologue.
Exactly. I think that's the first major hurdle for learners. There's this intense self-imposed pressure to provide this massive, highly entertaining update.
There really shouldn't be. The easiest, most natural replies are incredibly short. They just set the tone. Things like, "It was great," or "It was relaxing," or maybe "It was busy."
And if you really don't want to talk, there is a brilliant phrase that native speakers use all the time.
Oh, I know the one.
Yeah, nothing special.
Yes. Nothing special. I love that one. It is a polite, completely acceptable way to just, release the pressure valve and end the inquiry.
It immediately takes the spotlight off you. But let's assume you do actually want to share a little bit of your weekend.
To do that, we have to talk about the engine of the weekend recap. Since the weekend is over and the time has passed, we are forced to use the simple past tense.
Yes. And for language learners, this is usually where the mental math begins. You have to break your action verbs down into two main categories, right? Regular and irregular.
Regular ones are fine.
Yeah, the regular verbs are quite friendly. They follow a very predictable pattern. You literally just take the base action and add an ed sound at the end.
So if today I watch a movie, yesterday I watched a movie, today I cleaned my room, but on Saturday I cleaned it.
Precisely. It is the irregular verbs that tend to be the villains of the story here.
Because they absolutely refuse to follow that ed rule.
Right. They change completely, and they simply have to be memorized. So go becomes went. Eat becomes ate. See becomes saw.
I'm really curious about the psychology here. I talk to a lot of language learners who are just incredibly intimidated by irregular verbs.
Oh, totally. It's a huge pain point.
But when you break it down objectively, learning that eat becomes ate is really just learning a single new vocabulary sound.
Mm-hmm.
So why does it cause such disproportionate anxiety?
It's mostly because of the way it's taught. When you are speaking, your brain defaults to treating language like a math equation.
Okay, a math equation. Walk me through that.
So it takes the base verb, looks for the rule, realizes the ed rule doesn't apply, frantically searches a mental spreadsheet for the exception, and then tries to speak.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a 5-step math problem happening in a fraction of a second.
That sounds completely exhausting. How on earth do we bypass the math?
Well, by changing how we visualize the past tense entirely, I like to tell learners to imagine the simple past tense as a closed cardboard
A
box.
closed box.
Okay. Yeah. Whatever action you were talking about eating the pizza, visiting the friend it, is completely finished. You have packed it away in the box, folded the flaps, and taped it shut.
I see.
You need to stop thinking of went as the irregular past tense modification of the verb go. That's way too much math.
So what should I think of it as then?
Just think of went as the standalone word for travel that lives inside that closed box. When you feel that the time is finished, your brain just reaches for the finished word. You prioritize the feeling of the timeline over the grammatical rule itself.
Stop doing math and just reach for the closed box. That is a massive perspective shift. So how do native speakers actually use these closed box verbs in the real world?
Our source material provided two really brilliant real-life weekend stories from two people named Jack and Emma.
Yes, and they really demonstrate how to build an engaging story using this exact engine.
They do. They are basically master classes in not overcomplicating your delivery.
Let's analyze Jack's weekend first. Jack had a surprisingly chaotic Saturday.
He really did.
He woke up early, just wanting a peaceful morning with some tea and toast. But then he heard a sound in his kitchen.
Right.
He went in, and he found his neighbor's cat sitting right on his kitchen table, actively eating his toast.
Which is just crazy. And Jack includes this brilliant little detail. He says the cat just stared at him as if to say, "This toast is dry. Do you have jam?"
That is a wildly entertaining image. So
Wow.
Jack said, "Excuse me, Sir Cat. That is my breakfast."
I love that he called it Sir Cat.
Then he cleaned up the paw prints, went to the supermarket, and bought real food. And then his Sunday was totally different. He visited his sister, played with his nephew, and watched Harry Potter for the 25th time.
Now consider the verbs Jack used there. Woke, heard, found, said, cleaned, went, bought, visited, played, watched.
It's a really seamless mix of regular and irregular verbs.
Exactly, all firmly in that closed box of the past. But notice what he didn't do. He didn't use a single complex sentence structure.
Right. And Emma's story does the exact same thing, but with a much, much calmer vibe.
Yeah, Emma's was very chill.
On Saturday, Emma stayed home, read a book, cleaned her apartment, and cooked a delicious lunch pasta with mushrooms.
Again, stayed, read, cleaned, cooked, incredibly basic verbs.
But then Sundays where she really captures your attention. She went to the park with a friend. They walked, talked, and drank coffee.
Very standard small talk.
But then she highlights a very specific thing she saw. She saw a tiny little girl walking a dog that was massively bigger than her. And the dog was just proudly pulling the little girl along like, "I'm the boss now."
And this is where we have to look at the cognitive load of listening to a second language. When Emma says, "I saw a dog," or Jack says, "The cat ate my toast," they are using the absolute most basic subject-verb-object structures possible.
Why is that so brilliant, though?
Because it takes zero mental energy for the listener to decode.
Ah, I see. So instead of trying to formulate a sentence like, a neighbor's feline was observed consuming my baked goods, which sounds ridiculous anyway, Jack just says, "The cat ate my toast."
Exactly. When you use simple syntax, the listener doesn't have to work to understand your grammar. All of their brain power goes straight toward visualizing the image you are describing.
They just instantly see the movie in their head.
Exactly. The humor and the connection come from the visual details, the dry toast, the giant dog, not from the complexity of the grammar.
That takes so much pressure off. I feel like we have this myth that we need a C1 level academic vocabulary to be interesting at the water cooler.
It's a huge myth.
But Jack and Emma prove that you just need to observe the world around you and report back using simple closed box verbs.
Let's move from analyzing Jack and Emma to giving the listener a solid framework to build their own stories.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because when someone is sitting at home or driving their car right now, how can they build a weekend recap from scratch without getting completely lost?
Well, the sources outline a very practical framework for this. It is called the ON formula.
The ON formula.
Essentially, it's a skeletal structure to hang your verbs on. You start with on Saturday, I,
Yeah.
and then insert your past tense verb.
Like, on Saturday, I visited my family.
Exactly. Then you just do the same for the next day. On Sunday, I rested.
It acts as a chronological map. It keeps you, the speaker, totally grounded, and it gives the listener a really clear timeline to follow.
But there is a way to elevate this formula. You can take that simple structure and instantly make it sound vastly more fluent by adding what we call the feeling verb.
Oh, this is the difference between giving a robotic status report and having an actual human conversation.
Right. So instead of just stopping at, on Saturday I cleaned my house, you followed up with how that action actually made you feel. I felt tired, or I felt productive.
Or for Sunday, I felt lazy.
Yeah. Why does adding I felt change the dynamic of the small talk so significantly?
Because it invites empathy. If you just list your itinerary, cleaned, shopped, cooked, there isn't really much for the other person to respond to other than like, oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a dead end.
But the moment you say, I felt exhausted or I felt so lazy, the other person can relate to that. They can say, me too, man, I was so tired this weekend.
It shifts the function of the language from simply transferring raw information to actually building a social bond.
Exactly. So we have the timeline and we have the feeling. But I know for a fact that when learners start building these sentences, especially when they try to talk about what they did not do,
Oh boy.
they stumble into a massive grammatical trap.
The negative trap.
Yeah.
This is arguably the single most common error for A1 and A2 learners.
Oh, without a doubt.
I'll admit, my brain wants to fall into this trap too. If my weekend was terrible and I stayed in bed and I want to tell my colleague that I did not go to the store,
Right.
my brain knows the story happened in the past, so it aggressively wants to match the tenses. I want to say I didn't went to the store. That feels mathematically correct to me.
Yeah.
Both words are in the past.
It feels incredibly logical, but it is incorrect. The rule for making a negative sentence in the past is to use the helper word didn't, which is short for did not, followed by the base form of the main verb.
Not the past tense form.
Nope. The base form.
Wait, let me visualize this for a second. Think of the word didn't as essentially a time machine.
A time machine. That is a fantastic way to look at it.
Right, so the moment I drop the word didn't into my sentence, that time machine instantly travels back to yesterday or last Saturday.
Okay, I follow.
Because didn't is already firmly parked in the past, taking care of the entire timeline, my main verb doesn't have to do any heavy lifting at all. It can just relax in its normal, everyday base form.
You've got it perfectly. Didn't takes the whole sentence back in time. The main verb just gets to sit back and go along for the ride.
So it's not I didn't eat breakfast. It is I didn't eat. The time machine takes us back, and eat stays as eat. It's not I didn't watch the movie. It's I didn't watch.
And by simply avoiding that double past tense trap, by letting the main verb relax, your English will immediately sound significantly more advanced and native-like, even if you are only using the absolute most basic vocabulary.
Okay, so we've broken down the engine, we've looked at the psychology of the simple sentence, and we have our time machine.
We have a solid toolkit.
But understanding the theory of how a bicycle works doesn't mean you can instantly jump on and ride one. We have to physically practice.
Which brings us to a technique called shadowing.
Yes, the sources highly recommend this. Shadowing involves listening to an English phrase and immediately repeating it out loud, trying to perfectly mimic the speaker's rhythm, speed, and intonation.
You basically act as their vocal shadow.
Right, but I have to ask, I feel a little silly just talking to myself in my room. What is physically happening in my brain and my mouth when I do this shadowing exercise that just reading a textbook doesn't achieve?
Well, when you read a textbook, you are relying entirely on the analytical translating part of your brain. Shadowing physically bypasses that. It forces you to build muscle memory in your mouth, your tongue, and your jaw.
So it's a physical workout.
Exactly. You are physically training your articulators to move in new patterns. Furthermore, neurologically, you stop translating word for word and start absorbing entire phrases as single chunks.
That makes sense.
You shift from treating English like a rigid math equation to treating it like music. You are learning the melody of the sentence.
Treating English like music, that completely changes the approach. It's not about passing a test. It's about catching the rhythm.
Exactly.
So we are going to do a shadowing workout right now. I am going to speak directly to you, the listener. Wherever you are right now, in your living room, commuting, walking around bag, you need to move your mouth and speak out loud.
Don't be shy, just do it.
I will say a target phrase from our sources, and I'll give you a second to repeat it. Try matching my melody.
And I'll jump in to point out the specific musical notes you should be aiming for.
Perfect. Let's start with the opening response. Here we go. My weekend was great. Go ahead and say it.
Notice how emphasis lands really heavily on the word great. Try to raise your pitch slightly on that word.
Let's try a regular verb now. I watched a movie.
With watched, that ed ending actually sounds like a sharp T sound. Watched. Make sure that T is crisp.
Good. Now let's try an irregular verb. I visited a friend. Say it out loud.
Here, visited has 3 clear syllables. Visited. And the rhythm should flow smoothly right into the word a. Visited a friend.
Let's do another regular one. I slept a lot.
The melody here usually drops at the end of the sentence to show the thought is completely finished. Try letting your voice fall on the word lot.
Okay, let's use the timeline formula.
Yeah.
On Sunday, I relaxed.
Similar to watched, the ed on relaxed makes a sharp T sound. Relaxed.
You know, even just doing that handful of phrases, I can feel how it forces my mouth to navigate those sounds differently than when I'm just looking at them on a page.
It really does. And if you dedicate just a few minutes to that kind of physical shadowing daily, those phrases become completely automatic.
They just live in the muscle memory.
Right. When Monday morning rolls around, your mouth will already know the physical melody of "I watched a movie," and your brain won't have to frantically scramble to translate it.
Let's summarize the toolkit we've built today. Conquering Monday morning small talk is not about flexing a massive, complicated vocabulary.
Not at all.
It is about confidently using simple syntax so the listener can easily picture your story.
It requires embracing the simple past tense, trusting the closed box. It means using the on formula to structure your timeline, adding a feeling verb to bridge the gap between reporting and connecting.
And remembering that didn't is your time machine, so the main verb gets to just relax.
Exactly.
And it's about highlighting the small, specific, visual details. A cat asking for jam, or a tiny girl being dragged by a giant dog.
Because in the end, communication is fundamentally about human connection, not grammatical perfection. The colleague asking about your weekend genuinely wants to connect with you. They're not standing there with a red pen grading your syntax.
Which actually leads me to a final, somewhat provocative thought I want to leave you with today.
Oh, I like provocative thoughts. Let's hear it.
I want to issue a challenge to you, the listener. The next time someone at the office or on a video call asks you how your weekend was, I want you to intentionally make one tiny grammar mistake on purpose.
Oh, wow. That goes against literally every instinct a language learner has.
It totally does. But try it. Maybe you say, I eat a great piece instead of I ate. Or use the double past and say, I didn't went out. Just do it on purpose and watch what happens.
They're going to realize no one cares.
Because I guarantee you the sky will not fall, the grammar police will not kick down your office door, the other person will still completely understand the movie you're projecting in their head, the conversation will just keep flowing.
It is a brilliant way to dismantle the fear of failure. You prove to your own nervous system that connection easily survives errors.
Exactly. Connection survives errors. So remember that 5-second panic window we talked about at the very beginning?
The freeze response?
Yeah. Next Monday, you don't have to freeze. You have the engine, you have your time machine, and you are building the muscle memory. You are ready to tell your story.
Just pack the action in the box and share the details.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep shadowing out loud. Keep looking for those funny little visual details in your everyday life. And we will catch you next time.